Bum, 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 bum. It's time for some race or Formula 1 talk. Yep. See. It's Formula 1. And let's see. Yeah. It's a lot of the race, I would say. I mean, their podcast. And then they have made 3 clips. One, the 7 things that Japanese GP revealed about F1 2024. Some Mercedes driver gamble for 2025 maybe. And then was it some maybe Williams talk. Expensive bad day for Mercedes. No, Mercedes Williams. Probably. Yeah, and wait, fuck me, what? Man, I forgot how to start Minecraft word. And we will be continuing the mining. So many cats. And then we have also a lot of chickens that will one day disappear. So let's start with what I think revealed, the 7 things that revealed.
The Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka was the most revealing event of the 2024 Formula 1 season so far.
Oh shit, one must be Mercedes is bad. That's just been the fact since 2022 that Mercedes are bad. Maybe now is more proof they are bad. Visa Cash App RB Formula 1 team is best of the rest and will probably continue to be that. What more did we learn? Okay, that's 2. Maybe something about Williams, but I don't know is what. I mean that they. I mean, what to say? The priority was to make a good car that made so they maybe not have enough car stuff to have 2 cars running on a race if one of them crash. I mean that's more or less maybe future proofing the Williams team for the common or the years that will come. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't say that's something that you learn about, or like that you can learn anything about that. Oh shit, I've changed all the stuff on the roof. I believe I have. Man. Maybe something about steak. F1 team kick Sauber. That a lot of work is needed before Audi can maybe be good in that team if they continue next year being equally bad. Maybe something about Alpine. Let's see. Then we have Mercedes, Alpine, Isa Cash App, the Sauber, Steak, F1 team Sauber. So that's 4. Maybe something about Ferrari that they actually can be in fight against Red Bull next year. Maybe something about Haas, so that's 6. Maybe something about Aston Martin because Stroll, so that's 7. Maybe that, let's see.
Not only did it complete a set of 4 races at tracks with vastly differing characteristics, giving us our most rounded view of the performance of the cars yet, it also marked the first weekend of significant upgrades. What's more, as this race was just 6
Oh yeah, the upgrades for Alpine, that must be mentioned. Like, Alpine is like the new Williams.
months after the last one at Suzuka, it's the best measure so far of the gains made by the 10 teams with their new cars. So what conclusions can we draw?
That, I would say, is something interesting. I mean, people always seen Williams as the back marker. The team that will take paid drivers and stuff. But when they make a better car than Alpine, I mean, how many seasons do they have to do that until people will see Alpine as the team you go to if you have to pay yourself to get into a team?
Well, we've picked out 7 key takeaways.
I would say maybe if next year will be equally bad, maybe you can start saying that if they don't improve the years after that.
The Japanese Grand Prix weekend that reveal all. The return to the kind of track where McLaren excelled last year produced the first definitive evidence of how much it has gained on Red Bull in 2024 and where it hasn't done enough. McLaren's 2024 has gradually improved since an underwhelming season opener in Bahrain.
Okay, so... Oh shit, can you cheat here? Okay, so McLaren, Perez, stolen record, you also Visa Cash App RB. So Perez, okay, McLaren was wrong. Okay, Perez, surprise biggest improvement, what can that be? It can be the stuff I've been talking about. Eller, the teams I mentioned. Weakness. Yeah, Alpine and Mercedes. So I was 1, 2, maybe 3, 4. 4 stuff.
Which exposed the slow speed limitations the team needs another year or more to eliminate. As expected, it has performed better at tracks that emphasise medium and high speed aerodynamic performance. McLaren had the 4th fastest car in Saudi, the 3rd fastest car in Australia, and when it came to one lap pace, the 2nd fastest.
Wait, where is Mercedes on this list? Are they also somewhere up here?
Japan. The fact it was just over a 1/10.5 closer to Red Bull in the first sector means McLaren has chipped away further at Red Bull's medium and high speed advantage. But it was less competitive in Sector 2 compared to 2023 and slightly further off in Sector 3. The slow speed hairpin and chicane, and even the long straights, given it is not especially aerodynamically efficient, are still proving troublesome. The really bad news came in the race, where Lando Norris finished 30 seconds behind Verstappen. That's just over 10 seconds worse than last year. What's more, both Ferraris were stronger on race pace. That demonstrated that Ferrari has made big gains in high-speed performance. McLaren was a little disappointed with its pace at Suzuka overall. As team principal Andrea Stella admitted, Ferrari always had the beating of it.
I mean, shouldn't they be better? I mean, they are Ferrari, and Lewis Hamilton want to join them, so...
Sergio Perez this weekend was his most convincing of 2024. That's hugely significant given Suzuka was his low point last year. Just 6 months ago, Perez was almost 0.8 of a second slower than teammate Verstappen in qualifying. He was unlucky to suffer damage at the start last year and later clashed with Kevin Magnussen, and he was penalised for overtaking under the safety car before retiring. But 2024 was a completely different story. In qualifying, he was just 66 thousandths of a second slower than Verstappen.
Yeah, Perez is soon the champion. He will soon win a race and then take the lead, and just Verstappen will start blocking.
The main reason for that deficit was a poor exit from the chicane ahead of starting the lap and not being able to carry as much speed through Degner 2 as his teammates. Perez's qualifying was solid at the opening 3 races, but he was at another level at Suzuka, partly thanks to managing the Pirellis very well over a qualifying lap. He converted that into a third second place in 4 races, and that means he's doing exactly what the team needs him to do. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner says the seat is Perez's to lose, and Suzuka proved a strong case is being made to stay on in 2025. But why, you might ask, should we expect this to be any different to 2023? After all, Perez started last year strongly before enduring a long slump. Well, we don't know for sure how it will play out this year, but Perez is confident he has found his way again after getting lost in 2020.
Yeah, and he have not mentioned that he is the title container yet. Or someone that will maybe fight for this championship against Max Verstappen yet, so until then he maybe will be good.
23. As he put it at Suzuka, invoking Carlos Sainz's famous line from the 2022 British Grand Prix, he stopped inventing when it came to car setup and has got back to basics. Perez has started the season in good form. Even his...
So like not trying to be equal or better than Max Verstappen, just be himself.
Disappointing 5th place in Australia was partly explained by
not a great driver, but a good driver.
A loss of downforce caused when a visor tear-off became lodged in a sensitive part of the floor. Suzuka proved that it's far from a foregone conclusion he will be replaced in 2025.
Wait, what?
Daniel Ricciardo's season didn't start as hoped, but at Suzuka there was a glimmer of hope beyond his first lap crash with Alex Albon, and there could be another psychological boost for him just around the corner. Ricciardo's been pushing Red Bull's second team to look for possible underlying car issues due to his discomfort while trailing RB teammate Yuki Tsunoda in the opening races, and will get his wish of a new chassis for the next Grand Prix in China. RB does not believe there is any difference between the cars to explain the performance disparity, but will rule out an unusual discrepancy with a chassis change that was already on the cards for one of the drivers anyway, to manage chassis mileage across the season. As Ricciardo's seeking what he calls peace of mind, it makes sense for him to swap chassis instead of Tsunoda, who is so happy at the moment. While that has the air of being a last resort, there is some encouragement for Ricciardo. He was not as confident in the car as Tsunoda at high speed in the early races and in Australia. RB even dialed in a bit of understeer to give Ricciardo more confidence, but made the car inherently slower in the process. Ricciardo now admits his feeling in the car probably skewed how they should have approached addressing it. The instruction to Ricciardo is effectively to just get on with dealing with the car as it is. He's accepted that, and at Suzuka, the obvious silver lining was his best qualifying performance relative to Tsunoda so far this year, with a closer margin than his deleted.
Yeah, and then the race crash happened. Man, it could be maybe a fight between Ricciardo and Tsunoda who will get the last
lap
point.
In Australia would have had in Q.
If Ricciardo was maybe close to get the point, maybe one more what's it called? An attack by Yuki Tsunoda on Ricciardo again, like he did in Bahrain.
Q1. We didn't get to see in the race whether Ricciardo could build on that, but it was a useful boost ahead of the chassis change that will eliminate any remaining excuse.
Gather round for s'more Ben & Jerry's Sundays. Inspired by the campfire with gooey marshmallows, chocolate ice cream, and all the chunks and swirls. There's s'more to love in every spoonful. And a vegan flavor too. New from Ben & Jerry's.
Men nu, vad jobbar du med?
Oh my god. Nothing.
Nej, alltså jag jobbar med cybersäkerhet.
Jaha, skål för det va?
Skål.
Sjukt generös Chablis.
F1's return to Suzuka after just 6 months gave a rare opportunity to compare late season performance from 2023 with early season performance from
Ooh, like Mercedes.
2024. So the question of which team has made the biggest step is a fascinating one. The answer might surprise you because
Mercedes.
it's Aston Martin.
What?
Despite the green team having solid but unspectacular results
Surely Mercedes have done that.
at Suzuka, with Fernando Alonso starting 5th and finishing 6th, the car was a massive 1.874 seconds faster in qualifying than it was last year. Last year, the Aston
Mercedes.
Martin struggled in the high-speed corners at Suzuka at a point in the season where the team wasn't getting the best out of the car. But this year, there was a huge difference with Alonso able to qualify within half a second of pole position. Sauber also made big gains, lapping almost a second and a half faster, while the gains of just under 1.2 seconds
they
made
were
by Haas and Mercedes prove how
Mercedes and Haas is improving equally much. This is some bright future for Mercedes. Surely will be good in 2025.
much progress they have made. But perhaps most surprising is the team at the bottom of the list, Red Bull. Verstappen's pole position time was 0.680 seconds quicker than in 2023 on a weekend where he admitted to struggles with the ride quality and not being completely comfortable with the car. And that gives encouragement to the rest, proving that the hoped-for closing up of the field is happening. This year,
Yeah, they're closing up. I never heard that since 2022. The teams are closing up to Red Bull. Hey, true.
the gap from fastest to slowest constructor in qualifying was 1.619 seconds, whereas last year it was 2.172 seconds. The downside is that Red Bull still dominated the race, claiming a 1-2 finish with
Wait,
the best non
what do you mean Fuck me. What do you mean? They are closing up. Why? What do you have that talk that they still can win races super easy? Oh shit.
Red Bull 20 seconds behind Verstappen.
Yeah,
Charles
they are
Leclerc has
so
finished behind
close.
Ferrari teammate Carlos Sainz in the 3 races both have contested this year. And Suzuka revealed there's a specific and very surprising reason for that. Leclerc battled against an all-round lack of grip throughout the weekend. He lapped a 10th slower in qualifying than Sainz and said he simply didn't have the grip to go faster. Leclerc suggested the preparation of the tyres for a qualifying lap is the reason for that lack of grip. And he struggled throughout qualifying in the first sector relative to Sainz. The demanding snake section asks a lot of cars, and if the tyres aren't exactly where they should be temperature-wise, then it can cost time. That was certainly the case for Leclerc. It compounded his problems because the failure to set a quick enough time on his first Q1 run meant he burned 2 sets of softs in the first part of qualifying. That meant when it got to the business end of Q3, he only had 1 new set of softs left. Team principal Fred Vasseur felt this was the key to his qualifying struggles. Either way, it's clear that Sainz's advantage in qualifying was crucial to being able to finish ahead not only at Suzuka but also in Melbourne where he won. And it's very unusual for Leclerc to have trouble with qualifying speed. That reflects the fact that while Leclerc is fundamentally the quicker over a single lap, Sainz is close enough that when the complex challenge of optimising the tyres is particularly difficult, he's ahead. It's not all bad for Leclerc. His race pace was strong at Suzuka, turning 8th on the grid to 4th with a well-executed one-stop strategy. The reason he ended up behind Sainz was fundamentally that he started 4 places behind him. Leclerc was also quick in the preceding races, only finishing behind Sainz in Bahrain because of brake problems and lapping quickly on his way to 2nd in Australia. But Suzuka made clear he needs to up his game in the dark art of tyre prep.
Yeah, I hope he does. Like, it's not fun to watch Leclerc having a bad qualifying. I'm like, he need to make a good lap the first in the beginning, so you can have one more extra red tires to use, because man, they make qualifying more fun because you knew like that can maybe do something.
Preparation
Sainz can't.
in qualifying. Alpine brought its first real upgrade package of 2024 to Suzuka,
And
which
it did
included the
nothing.
first step in tackling the car's weight disadvantage and a new front wing. While the upgrade worked as expected, Alpine was still slowest. But the one person who is winning in this situation appears to be Esteban Ocon. That's not only thanks
Yeah. I mean, that celebration he did for getting to Q2 and then just finish in 15 and then fighting last with Gasly. I'm going to say that's something to celebrate.
thanks to his tendency to celebrate scraping into Q2 as if it was a victory, but also because he's asserted himself over teammate Pierre Gasly. Ocon's second
Yeah, not for long.
consecutive Q2 appearance means he's now outqualified Gasly in all 4 events in 2024. Ocon also finished 14 seconds ahead of his teammate after surviving contact between them at the restart that gave Gasly floor damage that compromised his race pace, but both were near the back ahead only of Logan Sargent. That reverses the trend of the second half of last year when Gasly got the upper hand. And it appears struggles with tyre preparation are at the heart of Gasly's problems so far this year. Ocon is out of contract at the end of the season. That's why it's important for him to perform regardless
Oh
of how bad.
yeah. Man, that I remember when he got his contract in 2021. Alpine was, we want him for the future, so we contract him a long contract with him, and then he just almost like he felt like, oh, I have the contract now, I can drive bad. But soon as he did the contract, he did really poorly. And I don't know, I mean, let's see, it's up now, so 2020, rather 2024, so 2025. So yeah, was it 4 years? It was a long contract. Well, long, the contract. What to say? Yeah.
The car is, either to boost his chances of a new Alpine deal or convince a rival team to sign him up. On paper, Suzuka looked like more of the same for Mercedes. Strong practice pace that fades into also-ran territory come qualifying and a mediocre race to 7th and 9th. But there was more to it than that. Lewis Hamilton could have qualified 4th on a track that so badly exposed Mercedes' weaknesses last season, but was only 7th. A lot of work was done in the build-up to better understand how to set up the car and prepare the tyres to avoid overloading the rear axle. That provided a stronger baseline for the weekend. Hamilton was encouraged by progress through practice and qualifying and was far more confident in the Mercedes W15, but described the car in the race as pretty bad. He finished 9th after abandoning an attempted one-stop strategy, not helped by minor damage sustained in a brush with Leclerc. However, despite Hamilton's criticism, it's fair to say Mercedes couldn't show its true pace in the race in particular because of the strategy that cost significant time in the long first stint. As team principal Toto Wolff said, Mercedes was better than the results suggested. But the smoother weekend...
They were? So why did you do the bad result then? I mean... That's weird.
Improved qualifying pace reveals why Mercedes can at least be slightly
good call.
encouraged.
We made
in
it
particular, the
bad
pace in the
on
high-speed
purpose.
first sector was a positive. Year on year, Mercedes was 0.332 seconds faster in the first sector, the second biggest gain of any team, having been extremely mediocre through the sweeps in 2023. Despite a disappointing race, Mercedes now believes its car is where it should have been for the Bahrain season opener. And a big part of that is the gap.
Well, it should have been. So-called being worse. Yeah, sure.
Gains made with the way it's using its tyres. That's still not anywhere near good enough for a team of its resources and ambition, but it's at least a gentle improvement.
A gentle improvement, so nothing. They improved nothing. It's like it's a touch that you can't even feel. It's like when you drop a paper on the floor that kind of damage, or what do you say? So yeah, so much have they improved. Okay, so that was their 7 reveal stuff. And then we have also, yeah, let's see, the brutal cost of wind and shocking F1 crash streak. See if the
Three big crashes, 2 damaged chassis and no spare car equals a brutal cost for an F1 team suffering a shocking streak of accidents. This is well beyond the worst outcome Williams would have expected for the start of the year, even though it knowingly took a big gamble ahead of the new season. The team only had 2 chassis ready for the opening races, and both of them have now been damaged across 2 crashes for Alex Albon, while teammate Logan Sargent heavily shunted the first one but had to be repaired. If you've seen our video explaining just how bad Williams' winter was, you will have a good idea of why it started this year so vulnerable. If you've not seen that video, check it out here, because then his tale of woe will make a lot more sense. The key details you need to know is that Williams ended up well behind schedule, due to a combination of outdated processes and systems, limited facilities, and a big change in the composition and management of its car build. Essentially, there was a lot more work to do and far more hassle, with a lot of the same infrastructure restrictions. Something had to give. Williams needed to sacrifice spare parts, performance updates, or the backup chassis for its pre-season focus. It chose to go ahead with only 2 chassis, hoping it could deal with any damage on site, with F1's ultra-competitive midfield demanding more of a performance focus. It was suboptimal, but not unprecedented, and Williams isn't actually alone. Fellow Crisis team Alpine has navigated the opening events without a spare chassis, so it was survivable. But all it needed was one big shunt in the first few races to cause a big problem, and Williams had 3. Albon had 2 of them, although he can only really take responsibility for one of them, having smashed his car into the wall in practice in Australia. He took over Sargent's car for the remainder of that event, while his own was sent back to the UK for repairs, a process that delayed the preparation of the spare chassis even further. So Williams still only had 2 chassis in Japan, where it suffered 2 more heavy crashes. Sargent now driving Albon's patched up chassis, shunted in Friday practice, but the damage was limited to bodywork, suspension components and the gearbox. Then 3 corners into Sunday's Grand Prix, Albon found him.
I mean, that's, man, the nightmare start. You don't have enough stuff to have 2 cars ready in one race, and then more crash after that. So
himself
depressing.
Helplessly careering into the wall after being turned into blindly by Daniel Ricciardo. That impact was not at super high speed, but the structure of the barrier there meant that the car came to quite a sudden and violent stop. The energy put through the car has caused enough damage that once again Williams has had to send back a race chassis to the UK for inspection and repairs before the next race in China. One of the factors that has made this so costly is where the crashes have taken place, because the F1 calendar has not been kind in this scenario. After the opening 2 races in the Middle East came a new calendar leg designed to cut down freight costs and emissions by grouping the races in Australia, Japan and China 2 weeks apart. Having crashes in Australia and Japan that was so big that the chassis needed to return to base for repairs both times is the absolute worst case scenario. It hugely increases the time and money involved in moving the cars back and forth between races and the factory in Grove. The process is not quick anyway. A detailed assessment needs to happen trackside first, checking things like suspension alignment, but also looking for energy overloads in the data that might indicate problem areas, with techniques like coloured liquid application and ultrasound to reveal the extent of cracks and damage. This does aid in determining the repair strategy and saves time once the car is back at base, but it needs to get there. And as team principal James Vowles put it, the worst place you could have a crash in this situation is in Australia, and the second worst place you could be racing next is Japan. Cargo space and custom details need to be sorted as well, even before you factor in that it takes more than a day to transport the car back from Australia. At least there, the crash happened earlier in the weekend. That bought some vital time, meaning Williams received it at around 2 AM on the Monday afterwards. The return journey from Japan's slightly less arduous, but this time the crash happened in the race, so the chassis was not released until Sunday evening. That put both repair jobs on a similar tight turnaround before the parts could be shipped to Asia. The chassis needs any punctures to be reinforced with patches, to undergo checks in a jig back at base for alignment, and be painted before shipment. In addition to being time sensitive from start to finish, Albon's Australia crash specifically added an extra burden on Williams personnel that could easily be overlooked. The weekend between the two races was a bank holiday in England, which meant asking the factory team to work several days extra to get the job done in time. That might sound trivial, but this is a team that had already gone through a brutal winter workload, so imagine how many personal or family plans went up in smoke. And there'll be plenty of people at Grove working unhappy shifts between now and China to manage the second repair too. As Albon put it, Williams has been relying on staff digging deep and producing miracles, and that's going to have to continue for a little longer.
No, that sounds working extra. I mean, if you're a big team like Mercedes and you have a Nico Rosberg Hamilton crash, that I don't know how often they crashed, but man, they have at least maybe the people to not have a big problem with that, to fix the car. But Williams, that can't be fun.
Unsurprisingly, the cost is enormous. The repairs, the replacement floors, wings and suspension components, at least 2 new gearboxes, the unexpected need to transport the chassis, it all adds up. The situation was so precarious even before Sunday's Japanese Grand Prix that Albon claims during the crash he was consciously thinking about how bad it would be for Williams while he was still heading for the wall. We understand this will end up costing Williams over $2 million across the 3 accidents, and it's likely going to be closer to $3 million once the full extent of Albon's Suzuka crash is understood. Williams is no longer in the financial grave it was in a few years ago, but while owner Doralton has bottomless pockets compared to the previous Williams era, F1's a budget-capped world now, and all of these costs will come out of that allowance. Every team does build a crash allowance into its budget cap projections for the season, but we think Williams is going to be pushing up close to that limit, if not past it already. That means, more likely than not, Williams' development budget will take a hit this season at some point. It's problematic given Williams is already behind the curve this year, thanks to winter problems which meant some development items that should have been there for the launch spec still aren't on the car now. That work is going to either be paused or diluted for the second time in a couple of weeks because the focus at the factory will have to be on the repairs. Keep in mind also that Albon was running some updates in Japan, including a new spec.
Yeah, it's so depressing. Had new stuff and they are gone. Just because Ricciardo had a bad start and Alex believed he could get past or keep driving where he was.
Front wing, which presumably was set to be on Sargent's car in China. It's possible that that might not be the case if Williams cannot produce enough parts to cover both cars with spares. And we know that the spare chassis is still not in circulation and has now been delayed once again. It was originally meant to be ready for race 1 in Bahrain, which became race 3 in Australia, then race 5 in China, and now race 6 in Miami, assuming no more unexpected setbacks.
Where do I...
The outcome of all of this is that in both the short and long term, these crashes have a tangible impact on Williams' bid to add performance to a car that clearly needs it. While this shouldn't have been an obvious negative talking point for all the drama.
So the witch and the zombie I hear can maybe come from the abandoned mine shaft that I found. It can maybe continue. Maybe, but we need pickaxe.
Of course, off track, the picture elsewhere on track doesn't look particularly good either. As we mentioned, the car was not as well developed as Williams would have liked for race 1, and since then it's not brought all the updates it would have wanted to because of the crash chaos. But the car is an improvement on last year's straight line speed merchant. It's got better...
I mean, like I said, Alpine looked like the new Williams. And Mercedes looked like the new Alpine.
Cornering performance and a better entry characteristic than before, and it is more well-rounded. The trade-off has had some negatives though. There's now a balance problem further through the corner, which causes some issues on traction. The car's also slower on the straights now, as it has more downforce and drag. That's left Williams struggling to be anything more than in the middle of the second block of 5 teams. Its qualifying performance has been unspectacular, leaving it 8th fastest after 4 races, and its race pace has been lacking, when it looks weaker than everybody except Alpine and slightly too hard on its tyres. That's why it's struggled to make an impact in the races so far. The car performance characteristics have meant no repeat of the past Albon tactic of overachieving in qualifying and then brilliantly hanging on at the head of a train of cars. He has overachieved to a degree, putting Williams as high as the 7th fastest team twice in 4 attempts. But even that leaves him outside the top 10, and the fact that that's yet to translate into a points finish shows which way his races have gone from there. Essentially, the Williams is now a much steadier midfield car than it was last year, but it is lacking the peaks that allowed it to snipe for points last year, and those points are now going to RB and Haas. Albon's even described Haas as the new Williams, as its low downforce, low drag car has been a nightmare to pass on the straights. It all comes back to needing to quickly improve the limited launch spec car, an effort that is routinely being compromised. Williams has shown good resilience through the deluge of setbacks, and while there has been plenty of criticism and even mockery of the team for finding itself in this position, it deserves some credit for pushing through the pain, and there's been a lot to push through. It's possible there's still more pain to come, though you would hope it's through the worst of it for everybody's sake. The likes of Vowles and Albon knew when they joined that there would be difficult moments and times when Williams would need to take 1 step back to take 2 forwards.
Okay, so you can say the Williams have wasted a lot of money in the first few races I have had. Let's see. Oh yeah, now it's time for the gamble.
Kryss 2.
Mercedes 2025 gamble talk from the race. Let's see. And then I have a picture of Max Verstappen, the first I have. The 2025 F1 driver gamble Mercedes is desperate to make. And why would Max Verstappen even go to Mercedes? This is just a big joke.
If you can't sign Max Verstappen, the best alternative is to get the next.
Maybe, but I would say highly likely they will pick Carlos Sainz to have some years in Mercedes. If he want a good car straight ahead, instead of being maybe in stake F1 team Kick Sauber. And then they can put Antonelli in Williams. And then just wait until I feel like, oh, we don't need Carlos Sainz anymore. Antonelli is good enough. He can join our team now. And then maybe Audi is good for Carlos Sainz. But yeah, but I will say Antonelli will go directly to Mercedes.
Max Verstappen. And that increasingly appears to be the plan for Mercedes as it works on replacing Ferrari-bound Lewis Hamilton in 2025. Mercedes has long seen Andrea Kimi Antonelli, or Kimi Antonelli as he's known, as the next big thing. Since it signed the Italian when he was a 12-year-old karter back in April 2019, Antonelli has emerged as the star of the Silver Arrows Young Driver programme. And Hamilton's unexpected departure means Antonelli is on course to be in a Mercedes far earlier than expected, probably not as George Russell's teammate in 2025. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff is being very careful not to talk about Antonelli too much and pile pressure on his shoulders. But there's every indication that the 17-year-old is the first choice for next year. Well, the first choice, that is, unless Verstappen really were to be available amid the
He's not stopped with his copium.
Speculation about his future. Mercedes hasn't completely given up hope on Verstappen making a shock defection should the politics that consumed Red Bull earlier in the year resurface. However, that remains a distant long shot for 2025. And when asked about the possibility of changing team at the end of the year during the Japanese Grand Prix weekend, Verstappen said he's very happy at Red Bull. Setting that remote possibility aside...
That can't be good for Toto Wolff. He have coping so much and talked... I mean, Max Verstappen even mentioned that how much Toto Wolff say nice things about him. Man, maybe you should have kept Lewis Hamilton if you
Antonelli is on pole position for Hamilton's seat.
wanted a good driver.
And the proof of that is in Wolff's willingness to let the other leading candidates for the drive sign on the dotted line elsewhere, while Mercedes works through the process of proving Antonelli really is ready. At the top of that list would be Ferrari's Carlos Sainz and Aston Martin driver Fernando Alonso. Yet, when Wolff was asked about the situation in terms of the 2025 driver options, he stressed that it would be weeks or even months before a choice is made. And in what he calls a very dynamic driver market, he accepts that some of the really good guys are about to sign for other teams. Mercedes would doubtless prefer it if drivers like Alonso and Sainz held off just in case, but they will both be eager to lock in their futures and won't risk hanging around as an insurance policy for Mercedes. Oh, and although Wolff has made some ostensibly positive comments about Sebastian Vettel, there's no serious interest, even though Wolff has been careful not to dismiss the possibility out of hand publicly. The need for Mercedes to take its time fits in with Antonelli being the favoured choice. He hasn't yet had the chance to prove conclusively that he is ready for promotion, which is why the final decision must wait. This call will be made based not only on his F2 progress after a tough start to the season for his Prema team, but also judged by his performances in upcoming F1 test outings in old machinery. And if alternatives take themselves off the market while that final judgment is made, so be it. It's extraordinary that the first choice for one of the biggest teams in F1 is a rookie who will only be 18 next season and as yet hasn't even won an F2 race. But the shock departure of Hamilton was not anticipated by Mercedes, neither was it desired. But now that it's inevitable, Wolff clearly wants to take advantage of it to fast-track a young mega-talent to a race seat.
Yeah, but to Mercedes, that's
Antonelli kicks off his Formula 1 test programme at the Red Bull Ring on April the 16th. He'll have 2 days of running in the 2021 Mercedes W12, the team's last championship-winning car and built to the old regulations. The rules permit teams to test with cars that are more than 2 seasons old, meaning Antonelli could have driven the 2022 car to get a taste of the current ground effect machines. However, Mercedes opted to start him off in the 2021 car, so he gets...
Yeah, why would you wanna drive a bad car?
To experience a really good car for his first go.
Yeah, better to try a good car than something that you don't know why is bad or why is good sometimes. That would just be a waste of time.
In F1 machinery. Antonelli will move into the 2022 car in due course, but this test program...
Oh my god, and then he will feel how bad it is to drive for Mercedes. How good it could be, how bad this really is. Man, sounds like World of Warcraft. You know how good it was, but the good times can't improve the bad times you're playing in now.
Hasn't been created as a consequence of Hamilton signing for Ferrari because Mercedes realised it might need Antonelli in 2025. This was always the plan as part of his F1 education. What has changed is that Antonelli now has more days of F1 testing scheduled for this year than he originally did. The Red Bull Ring date has long since been slated for his first test. It fits neatly into the gap in the F2 calendar between the third round in Australia in March and the resumption of the season at Imola in mid-May. But as well as mileage in the 2021 and 22 Mercedes, there are potentially other opportunities to give Antonelli F1 seat time. He won't be allowed to participate in tyre testing using the 2024 car, given the regulations stipulate a driver must have competed in one F1 race to be eligible. However, there is a young driver test after the Abu Dhabi season finale. There's also the possibility that he could appear in FP1 sessions later in the season, either for Mercedes or another team, but that cannot happen until after he turns 18 on August the 25th to be eligible for a super licence. There's even the chance that if Mercedes commits to running him in 2025, it could attempt to place Antonelli with another F1 team for some races in the second half of the season. Williams would appear the obvious choice given Logan Sargent's ongoing struggles. Any plans for Antonelli have not yet been confirmed, but it's clear that his progress in testing old machinery will play a key role in shaping his programme for the rest of this year and 2025. While Mercedes hopes Antonelli really is the new Verstappen in terms of what he can achieve on
So George Russell isn't that? What?
track, potentially shaking up F1 as a teenager if he races for the Silver Arrows next year, there's more to Wolff's eagerness to promote him than that. Mercedes was in the running to sign Verstappen way back in 2014 when he was in his first season of car racing in F3. But Red Bull managed to land this prize asset as, unlike Mercedes and Ferrari, which was also in the hunt, it could offer Verstappen an immediate F1 graduation in 2015. Mercedes was frustrated to have been blown out of the water by what Red Bull could offer, and the rest is history, with Verstappen proving a thorn in the side of the Mercedes team ever since.
And Abu Dhabi 2021 can't make that feeling better. Man, Toto Wolff have a tough time now. Nothing going his way.
Wolff wants to put all that right by signing Verstappen one day. He recently described that as a relationship that needs to happen. He just doesn't know when. So if the slender chance it happens in 2025 doesn't materialise, Antonelli offers the tantalising hope that he could be to F1 now what Verstappen was a decade ago. And the missed opportunity of a decade ago is doubtless in Wolff's mind as he considers whether to greenlight Antonelli being fast-tracked. What Hamilton's Ferrari move has done is allow Antonelli's pathway to a Mercedes seat to be accelerated. Antonelli's F2 campaign hasn't got off to the best of starts. He's down in 9th in the championship. However, things are going in the right direction. He had a difficult debut in Bahrain as both he and Prema Racing teammate Ollie Bearman were off the pace, although Antonelli finished ahead in both races. But there was a big step forward in Saudi Arabia, where Antonelli showed flashes of pace after Prema made a big step forward with its cars, but he was a couple of tenths off Bearman's qualifying speed. Antonelli has suffered the growing pains you'd expect of an F2 rookie, with incidents in the sprint races in both Jeddah and Melbourne, but in the Australia feature race he finished a season best 4th after qualifying on the front row. Even so, he was frustrated to miss out on a first podium finish after struggling with the balance following his pit stop. That reflects the fact Prema still isn't entirely on top of the setup challenges of the new for 2024 F2 car. The upcoming 3-day F2 test in Barcelona will be crucial in improving that, with Antonelli's hopes of emerging as a title contender dependent on Prema making more progress. Antonelli has shown flashes of pace, and with 3 F2 weekends under his belt, needs to kick on when the championship resumes at Imola in May to further his claim for a Mercedes F1 seat. Before Hamilton revealed he was heading to Maranello, the hope will have been that Antonelli stars in F2 this season and could then be eased into F1 with a smaller team. Williams would be the obvious choice given team principal James.
I feel like it will still happen. Don't know why they will. I mean, that's if the Mercedes car is good. If they still think the car will be bad, then no need to maybe fast track him into Williams, then you can just have him in the bad Mercedes, because you will not lose anything by having him there.
James Vowles worked with Antonelli and shares Wolff's belief that he is the next big thing. That would echo George Russell's deal to race for Williams from 2019 to 2021 prior to becoming a Mercedes driver. But the Mercedes vacancy in 2025 has created a very different possible timeline. And as Mercedes is unlikely to be a World Championship contender next year, it can afford to risk having an inconsistent rookie in the car for a learning season. This means Antonelli is set up for a shock promotion that seemed impossible just a few months ago. And while it might seem ridiculous for a rookie who has yet to drive an F1 car to be the favourite for a seat with one of F1's grandee teams, he really is reckoned to be that good and capable of making a Verstappen-esque impact. And as Wolff has pointed out, Antonelli's F2 teammate Ollie Bearman's outstanding Grand Prix debut for Ferrari shows what a rookie can be capable of. The pressure is on for Antonelli to deliver both in F2 and his F1 testing opportunities, and it's a lot to ask of someone who is only 17. But Mercedes is giving him these chances by way of due diligence in ensuring he's ready in the expectation he will thrive. As the saying goes, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And Mercedes is absolutely certain Antonelli is good enough.
Let's see. Do I feel... Will they have him? Man, that's... I would say no. I mean, I feel like they want to still fighting for stuff. So I feel like having him in Williams would just make a better deal for them. So yeah. Oh, And now let's. So, if I was Mercedes, I would pick Carlos Sainz and then put Antonelli in Williams. If you are coping and think Mercedes will be good 2025. But if you're not, then sure, put him in the team. And then maybe someone else can go to Williams. Oh, let's start the race podcast. Let's see how good that will be. Okay, look like I can't remove. Oh. Oh shit. Now we can see what the podcast would tell us.
The Athletic.
The race is on.
The race is on, and while Red Bull took its third 1-2 of 2024 in the Japanese Grand Prix, it was a race of conflicting strategies in the scrap for the final podium place. But why was Verstappen still able to canter to victory even on a difficult weekend, and what explains the performance swings in the group behind? I'm Ed Straw, and joining us with all the answers are Mark Hughes and Scott Mitchell-Malm. Well, I'm obliged to ask, with this early race, tell me about the cherry blossom.
Yeah, obviously change from the usual sort of towards the end of the season slot to early April means it has had a slightly different backdrop. It's been quite nice and scenic, actually. I will admit, though, I wasn't in the best place this week to actually check out the surroundings too much, but it looked quite pretty from the coach on the way in.
Yeah, very pretty. It's not just the cherry blossom, it's the fact that the sky is bright blue, and I normally associate skies here as being a bit...
Yeah, before they start talking, like, should I keep mining, or should I actually do something fun? Yeah, I want to swim around and collect fishes. And maybe collect more iron if I need more buckets. So they can continue talking.
Moody and grey and sometimes black. And yeah, it's still a great place to be no matter what time of the year.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of it when you come here normally, that you're right, when it's that kind of like like milky white greyish kind of backdrop to everything, and it's the sheer brutality and awesomeness of the circuit that shines through. But it's had a bit more of a picturesque backdrop this week, so it's been quite lovely.
So it's like the contrast has just been shunted up compared to usual.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, the main picture is the same picture. It's just slightly different contrast.
Excellent. Well, it's a great time of year to have the race. Certainly an improvement. It created an interesting one. So, Mark, let's get on with it, because it was the most intriguing race of the season, with strategic divergence and all three tyre compounds proving viable options. So, how did it play out?
Yes, there was one stops and two stops. Were failed one stops, converted into two stops by Mercedes. It played out with Verstappen winning with a standard two-stop. Red Bull had saved two sets of mediums and only one hard, same as Ferrari had done. That probably...
Yeah, probably not for Leclerc. They maybe did that for Leclerc, but not that he got to use that, I think. And man, why wasn't I this lucky yesterday?
Increased their advantage a little bit. The medium was probably a slightly better tyre than the hard.
Blue, black.
Mercedes and McLaren had saved the only one set of medium and two hard. So, yeah, obviously Verstappen ran away in a race of his own
What do you mean? It's so close. Just look at the qualifying. Just look at the times. Just look at how far off people are in the qualifying. It's so close. What do you mean?
Usually does, but
the
race
so
behind
close.
was quite intriguing, and yeah, it was obviously taken by the runner-up spot was taken by Perez, quite some distance behind Verstappen, but he kept under pressure by Sainz's Ferrari, and if Sainz had not been stuck behind Lando Norris in the first stint, which was a result of being out-qualified by Lando Norris, I think he could have put some real pressure on at the end. He
wouldn't. Stop acting like he would.
Seriously quick at the end of the race, but he just a little bit too far behind and sort of ran out of laps. But he'd lost something like, probably 6-7 seconds in that first stint, being stuck at...
Wow, so much. That he almost the race winner if he didn't lose so much time.
Norris's pace. The Ferrari was definitely the second fastest car here, even though Lando qualified. Lando's third, P3 in qualifying, made McLaren the second fastest officially in qualifying. And
not new fish.
Yeah,
but... oh my God!
McLaren boss Andrea Stella was explaining that over a single lap on new soft tyres, some of the car's shortcomings are sort of disguised a little bit, and so like the slow corner performance and the hairpin especially. But as soon as you start putting a number of laps on the tyres, then that weakness becomes apparent. And the Ferrari was clear number 2 behind the Red Bull, and
so Ferrari is clear number 2. McLaren was behind Ferrari. Does that mean McLaren is clear number 3? So when you're talking about Mercedes, you're actually talking about Aston Martin and McLaren, Mercedes fight, right?
And Sainz did a great job on a conventional 2-stop. Ran, really hard once he got some clear air, and was just very, very impressive throughout. Leclerc ran for an absolute age doing a 1-stop. He fully intended to do a 1-stop despite starting on the medium, and he managed to get it to run. Well, in fact, he made his first and only stop on the same lap as Norris made his second stop. And so, that Leclerc was able to defeat Norris and take 4th place. But that was partly because of how early Norris had been forced to pit at the first stops by the undercut pressure put on him by Sainz. So that was the competitive picture, really. Red Bull, then Ferrari, then McLaren, and then behind them a quite evenly matched Mercedes, Aston Martin lineup with...
Wait. God damn it, I hate... Let's see, do we have... I want to see... yeah, and then we go... Yeah, Fernando Alonso, P6. Oscar Piastri could be in P7. So you more or less should say Aston Martin, then Mercedes, Aston Martin, if you want to be more correct.
That was really just decided upon Merck's abandoned 1-stop strategy and Alonso going through in a 2-stop.
And obviously, as you say, Red Bull was still conclusively ahead. Scott, is there any disappointment? We had...
for some reason, people say it's close between the teams. Between who? Gasly and Ocon.
Maybe McLaren might be a little bit closer. They were closer than they were last year, but not close enough to be a factor. And then Ferrari was quicker than them in the race. So was it a little bit disappointing there wasn't a bit more of a hint of a threat? Or, as Mark alluded to, do you think, well, perhaps if the race had played out differently, we might have seen a bit more from Ferrari, maybe?
Nope.
There's a bit of a disappointment from...
Maybe more for Leclerc, but not Sainz.
The McLaren side, I think, just because... I think just coming into the weekend for starters, lot of expectation based off the fact that this was where McLaren was so strong last year. Because it's not a track that Ferrari shone on previously, I think if anything they'd be pleasantly surprised with what they've achieved this weekend. So it depends how you look at it. I don't see any team reflecting on the weekend as, oh, that was a missed opportunity to tackle Red Bull, for example. Lando Norris seemed to feel that actually, if anything, he'd overachieved on the Saturday. So yeah, actually just regressed to where the car should have been on the Sunday. So no race-specific disappointment for him because it was about where the car should have been. Maybe that bigger picture of disappointment for McLaren in that they've been usurped on the track where they were strongest last year behind Red Bull. I would imagine it is a source of some frustration, disappointment and motivation to have lost out to Ferrari here, because I feel like for all of the talk of needing to improve in the areas that they're weak, particularly slow speed corners, and that mitigating elements of how it has started the season in Bahrain in particular, there was this trend of it getting better and being on a nice trajectory as it went on a run of circuits that were increasingly more suited to the car. But we've just come here where this is probably the McLaren at its peak.
Oh my god, hype!
And it's still been beaten by Ferrari over a race distance. So it just cements the fact that McLaren is third best, which is a pretty good place to be cemented. But when you start third and you run the first stint third, I'm sure Norris would have wanted a better result than what he got.
Would you say, Mark, the strategic variance we saw was revealing of anything, or does it just follow on from FP2 being a wet session and the fact that race day was a lot warmer than anything we'd seen in practice?
It's a very, very high deg circuit, the best of times, and the increased track temperature put some extra strain on the tyres and also left the teams even more clueless about how it might unfold because of the restricted running on Friday FP2. So
did I get it?
I don't think there are any real surprises there. There was
no try that for me.
You know, when you need a second a lap advantage on this track to overtake. So in your first stint, when everybody's on the same age tyres, nobody overtakes. You get in position and you just run at that pace, or whatever that pace is, and just try and look after your tyres, and then try and nudge up towards the undercut, or defend from the undercut as that window opens for the first pit stop. And as you get a bit of variance between the new tyres and the old tyres, because the degradation rate is so high, the new tyres are massively faster than the old tyres, and then you see lots of overtaking. But it doesn't really mean much. It just sort of just determines the way the race plays out rather than it.
I mean, I would say they makes stuff actually happen than other races when everyone just drive up to each other.
You are seeing people overtaking in the S's and all those things. It was great. It looks fantastic. But it's just really a function of high tyre deg and variation in strategy.
Was the distance between the Ferraris by the end of the race smaller than it should have been? Because I did wonder if I think Leclerc did a fantastic job maximising that strategy.
He did, yeah. I think, but you got to counter that. You got to bear in mind that Sainz had lost a lot of time in the first stint.
Yeah, if Carlos Sainz haven't lost so much time, he would surely been up there and almost a winner.
Yeah, Norris, but I think both Ferrari drivers did a great job.
Because the way that Sainz had to play that race, obviously he was in that position in the first stint where he was being contained, and then I guess once he gets in, I think he extended both his stints, didn't he?
Yeah.
So there's that element of almost playing a little bit of chess and managing the tyres, plus trying to work out. I felt like he was always trying to work out who his race was with, because there was that point where it's like, actually, you can see Perez is in that picture because of the way that the undercut worked in the first stint for Norris in particular. But you've got the second Red Bull kind of tantalisingly, that seemingly within reach at stages of the race. You've got the McLaren that you're racing early on. All of a sudden Leclerc's in the picture because of his strategy. And at the end of the race, I think Sainz even had to ask, didn't he?
He did, yeah. So he was catching Lando pretty quickly, and Lando just in front of him was Charles. And so he obviously realised that actually, I'm going to pass these two. I've got the speed to pass these two. And he said, am I racing here? And I said, yeah, you're racing for a podium. And so, yeah, he was easily able to pass Lando and was allowed pass by Leclerc. And then he got on and chased Checo.
Yeah, the chase was 100% on. If he didn't lose so much time in the start, he will have passed him super easily.
But he was a little bit too far behind by then.
You know you've got an intriguing race strategically when even Carlos Sainz is losing track of it a little bit. But of course, he was ahead by some margin of Leclerc in qualifying because Leclerc was struggling, he thought, with the tyre prep, and he joked after the race, I don't normally have to worry about qualifying, but we saw a similar thing in slightly different circumstances in Australia, so that's an interesting thing to track in terms of Leclerc's progress.
Jag visste att min farfars farfar Sven föddes i Örebro.
Oh my god.
Genom ancestry fick jag reda på att han var...
Hi. Yeah, the one thing I would say on that is obviously I know exactly what you mean by that, Ed, because it was the trailing of him of Sainz through qualifying that was so striking for Leclerc, wasn't it? And the big deficit to begin with. In the end, the final margin wasn't actually that significant, was it? It was, what was it, just over a tenth. That obviously added up to 4 places on the grid. But I think you messaged me on Saturday, and I might have actually stolen that bit of phrasing in a piece that we wrote on the website, or paraphrased you. But the way that Leclerc was talking after Saturday, and to a lesser extent on Sunday as well, you'd have think he'd just had some kind of career-ending qualifying shocker, and he was a 10th from the second row of the grid and his teammate. But it was all part of this issue that he feels it was there in Melbourne as well. I don't know. He definitely specified from Melbourne. I don't know if he battled it to a degree in Bahrain or Jeddah. Maybe not, because of the nature of those 2 tracks. It wasn't too much of a problem to generate the tyre temperature, but feels like something was missing on the tyre prep side. So he has just been chasing a bit of feeling and confidence in qualifying, which, as you mentioned.
I wonder if when they finally succeed to be good in qualifying and then good in races, would all the talk about Carlos Sainz being good disappear? Maybe.
He said he doesn't normally have to worry too much. The 1 lap pace is his forte, and I thought it was quite. He'd have much rather obviously just had the great qualifying session and raced from 4th on the grid, because who knows what he could have achieved based on the way he played that race. Maybe he had the pace to beat Perez and split the Red Bulls, but I think we discussed this during the race, Ed.
Not Sainz.
Kind of nice in a way to have it this way, because it was a good reminder from Leclerc of the people who are a bit simplistic about his skill set sometimes, that he's got that kind of time management race in his locker, hasn't he?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. He's shown it many times in the past. It's true to say that sometimes when things get a bit tricky with the tyres, and in qualifying in particular, he can lose out a bit to Sainz in terms of putting it all together. But he's not an idiot. He's a very capable driver. It's just sometimes the complexities he doesn't deal with quite as well as Sainz. It's a small difference, but he does have these very, very strong race drives. He's not just driving really fast over a race stint and gets a good result. There's a lot more to his art than that. We should talk a little bit more about Perez though, Scott, because he admitted Suzuka last year was probably his nadir, but he pushed Verstappen hard in qualifying, took his 3rd second place in 4 races. So how convinced are you by his progress?
I think he started the season very well. I think
and he will
Helmut
continue.
Marko did him a little bit of a disservice in weekend when he said that he's only driving like this because it's contract renewal season.
Yeah, I felt that was he was really trying last year, Perez. If anything, he was trying too hard.
Yeah, exactly. So I think
it's always contract renewal season for him, isn't it?
Yeah,
you only guess 1 year at a time.
That's just the way for Red Bull drivers, really, isn't it? Every race can be your last race.
Yes, that's true. Maybe that's the key, is not give anyone a contract. Give everyone like a rolling 3-month contract. That's the way to get the most out of them. No, and obviously there was another form.
Oh my
of
god,
motivation.
that would be so depressing. You have 1 bad race and then you just, oh my god, have I fucked up now?
Checo this weekend did some kind of what seemed to be reasonably staked bet between himself and Christian Horner, which seemed to be about whether he could qualify on the front row, which is exactly what he did. His pace versus Verstappen in qualifying was very strong. The race performance, as ever, it bleeds away a little bit because it's that relentlessness over a Grand Prix. So that's what Verstappen loves. You know, you might think Verstappen as someone who just wants to get out there and absolutely nail a lap, because he's a kind of classic racer at heart, and classic racers love qualifying and putting the car on the limit. Max just loves stringing together an hour and a half's worth of mega laps. He knows that anybody on that grid can do a mega one-off qualifying lap, but doing it over a Grand Prix distance, that's the trick. So Perez, does lose out. If you're slower over one lap, you're going to be slower over 50 odd laps, aren't you?
Yes,
but I think he's doing not just what Red Bull needs him to do. I think he's actually doing more than that now. And I would argue, even though the results are less impressive, I think this is actually a better start to the season for Perez than last year, because I feel like the pace is a little bit more convincing.
Yeah, absolutely. He's doing what he needs to do, so he's making his case to stay on. Only 4 races in, but I like his approach. I think he's not overreaching. By his own admission, he's not doing that and looking for things that maybe aren't there and trying to be too clever with the setup. He's back to basics and he's delivering. He's building on that little hint of progress at the back end of last year.
Maybe.
Right, Mark, we've had our first dose of Fernando Alonso talking himself up spectacularly of this season. He described his 6th place from 5th on the grid as inside the top 5 ever for me. I mean, his top 5 list by his recent statements probably includes about 50 weekends, but he was about 15 seconds behind Norris and finished 6th. So has he got a point?
He drove a very good race. He drove a typically feisty...
Yeah, better than Mercedes could succeed with. No, that's something. The future of Mercedes.
Cunning Alonso race.
Oh, one more trident pipe, maybe.
He's top 5. He's driven some staggeringly good races over his career. So, no, I don't think so. But yeah,
crazy.
Very, very impressive. Very smart. He did the DRS trick when he had Russell on newer tyres coming up behind Piastri, who was just behind him. He knew that if Russell got by Piastri, he would be able to get by him as well. So he did that Carlos Sainz in Singapore trick of helping the other guy by backing off and letting them use the DRS to prevent them coming by. He qualified the car, about where it should have been, and he ran a slightly offset tyre strategy, started on the softs, made it work. It was a very, very good race. It was a faultless race, but
And then I heard Stroll tried to use red tyres in the end and it didn't go good. Wait, fuck. Did it move? Weird. Is that why this come from? Kill a zombie, then it's... Huh. But I must try out next time.
No, a great race involves doing something extraordinary. I don't think he did anything extraordinary. He was just very, very good. Par for the course, Alonso, very, very good.
Yeah, his rationale for why he rated it so highly was that he feels that car is firmly 5th fastest. So his logic is that he's significantly overachieving over one lap and then in the Grand Prix itself as well. What do you think, Ed, he said when I asked him how he comes to that ranking?
He will... that's an interesting question. I think he probably just thought, I'm Fernando Alonso, of course it's brilliant. And then if you actually presented him with a list of races, he'd have a bit of trouble. And he'd say, well, they're all equal first.
I mean, how do you think he came to the ranking of the pecking order, the teams?
Oh, the pecking order. Well, I think, I think the Mercedes was quicker. And because Hamilton could have been ahead in qualifying, couldn't he? So I think that's perfectly reasonable.
He could, but he didn't.
So I was trying to get him to basically, is it based on others underachieving? Is it based on, when everybody pieces together their best laps, you've got 4 cars that should be ahead of you, but you're so good at piecing together your best laps that you're overachieving, but you can see in the data, you can see in the ideal lap times that Aston Martin only has the 5th fastest car. Fernando didn't say any of that. He cut me off mid-question and then just said, because I'm the one driving the car.
Well, he has a fair point, but equally, if you look at the ideal sectors in qualifying, he put together his 3 best sectors when it mattered. not many of the other leading drivers in the front-running teams managed to do that. So it's one of the things with Alonso. He says these really grand things, and while you may argue it's not in his top 5 because that's like pretty competitive, he did have a really good weekend. I haven't done my full driver rankings working out, but he's certainly in the pot of drivers who's competing for number 1 for the weekend. I haven't done the full analysis, but he couldn't have done much more, certainly.
He's in your top 5?
He's certainly in my top 5. I think that's a fairly likely prediction unless I find something unexpected. I like to do a little bit of an in-depth race pace study and that kind of thing. But anyway, let's talk about Mercedes now, Scott, because it seemed to be...
Monsieur the type time. Yeah, they did a really great work. Really great job. Lewis Hamilton was really happy. Yellow tail parrotfish. Not a new fish. Alla new fish. New fish for the collection.
Okay, some more of the same for them, with George Russell 7th, Lewis Hamilton 9th. But there was actually some positivity from within the camp, and I'm going to bring in a question from the Race Members Club now from Owain Thomas as it tackles this topic well. He asks, why was there so much talking up of Mercedes' performance this weekend?
Yeah, true. They're so bad. And people are just coping that, no, they are good. Why are they good? They don't show anything that says good. I mean, the practice was good.
They seemed just as unconvincing in qualifying in the race.
True. Short air time. Get them one more air time.
There were absolutely just signs and trends of this weekend that we've seen over the first 3. I understand that completely, and I don't think anyone can hide from it, and Mercedes wouldn't either. If you look at it purely on paper, it's another weekend that involves going very quickly during practice, fading a bit through qualifying, and ending up having a relatively mediocre result. That's not something that you can hide when your cars start and finish the race 7th and 9th. That just is what it is. I think the difference is that, one, the Mercedes had a better baseline from the start of the weekend that then carried through the weekend. The car behaviour didn't seem to change nastily. It didn't seem to fall away from them session to session. There wasn't any inexplicable drop-off in performance. Lewis Hamilton wasn't thrilled with what he said was a car that felt very bad in the Grand Prix, but that seemed to just be a function of higher than expected tyre degradation rather than the car sort of suddenly falling out of a performance window or a sweet spot in perhaps the way it has at other events. This was off the back of a lot of work coming into the weekend after Melbourne, establishing a better way of setting the car up and preparing the tyres to use them in a way that didn't overstress the rear axle, because Mercedes' theory basically at the moment seems to be, in really simplistic terms, that they haven't been getting the most out of the tyres to consistently maximise the car's performance. They seem to have ruled out any missing aerodynamic performance that the numbers say should be there but isn't there. I think that is something that had certainly been not just hinted but outright stated at earlier races. That doesn't seem to be what they're looking at now. It's more that they have the aerodynamic performance they're expecting, but they don't have the cornering speed and the lap time that they're expecting to go with it. The car is not as fast in reality as it is in the virtual world, and I've checked, and that is to an abnormal degree, because I don't think anyone's car is as quick in reality as it is in the virtual world, because the virtual world is perfect and has a lot less variables. So with all that in mind, the reason there's encouragement and a bit more positivity about Mercedes is because they feel that they had that better baseline. They
feel like they have a car now. I mean, yay, great improvement.
They understand how to keep the car in that sort of sweet spot a little bit better, or not knock it out of that sweet spot. They feel that they've at least now established where the car is. Now that's not good, with the car being what seems to...
We now know how bad our car is, and that's our improvement. Nice.
The 4 fastest is not good for a team of Mercedes' size, its resources and its ambitions, but what they were looking for from this weekend is more of an accurate reference. Where do they need to start adding performance? What are their actual problems? They feel like that is what they...
Yeah, they feel like they know. They don't know.
have a better understanding of now. They need more than one race to actually get a convincing sample set to underline that, and then beyond that, they need to actually prove that they can then add performance in the areas they need it. But that's why there is this air of encouragement around what looks like an otherwise routinely mundane result and performance.
The one thing that was interesting, Mark, is on Sky Sports, Toto Wolff said that we'd have been racing for a podium, perhaps with a normal strategy. That seemed a bit bold.
I think that's probably stretching it a bit, but...
Little bit. That sounds like stretching like it's a lot. McLaren could have done that. Not Mercedes.
It was quite conceivable that with a better lap, Lewis could have qualified 4th. And from there, with the correct strategy, which obviously you only know in hindsight, yeah, he probably could have been fighting for a podium, but as starting from P7, no, I don't think.
Fighting for a podium. I mean, what do you mean by fighting? Just being 4th? Is that fighting when you can't actually try to get past the 3rd car?
They would have been fighting for a podium even with a better strategy.
I would say that I'll accept there's genuine reasons for them to be happy with the progress, because everything's recalibrated there, hasn't it? We're not expecting Mercedes to be challenging Red Bull or anything, or being second best. This is judged by where they were in the first 3 races, and at least they've made some kind of encouraging progress, although we want to see if there's those fluctuations in form from track to track they're not expecting. But at least they seem like they've got a little bit more of a handle on what's...
I mean, because this look like they know what they're doing doesn't mean they know what they're doing. Like,
going
stop
on,
copying.
Of course, yeah, it was just undone by the strategy not being great in the race. So, still nowhere near good enough. But the first thing you look for with any team is, are they moving in a positive direction? And they've turned into a positive direction this weekend.
Wow, they're on the right direction. So they can still be 100% far off.
And whether it'll be enough, whether it'll get them much further is another question. But gently positive, I think, is the way I'd describe the weekend. Mark, Yuki Tsunoda, he bagged his 2nd consecutive points finish. That's his first top 10 on home soil as well. How impressed were you with him?
Yeah, perfect weekend, really. Didn't put a foot wrong. You know, he was very, very marginally faster than Ricciardo in qualifying, which was the difference between getting into Q3 and not, but he was the one that did it. And, yep, just put together a very, very good race. Alternately aggressive and sort of calm as required and needed at various phases of the race. And a good defence at the end to hang on to that point from Hülkenberg. So, yeah, I mean, he's doing
Thanks for the
everything that could be asked of him, really.
This Superman
I like the fact this was a slightly more complicated race than Australia was for him, which is good because he dealt with it well, as you alluded to there, which is what we always look for with Tsunoda. He was talking about before the last race about having brain overheating moments and things in races and his need to do that. His phrase, not mine. But it's really positive when you see this kind of in control. It would have been very easy just to trip over and make a little error somewhere and end up 11th or 12th rather than grabbing that final point. So, yeah, very, very positive for him. Scott, we should talk about his teammate, Daniel Ricciardo, a bit as well, because the race was red flagged on the first lap thanks to a crash involving Ricciardo and Alex Albon at turn 3. Stewards took no action. What did you make of it?
Yeah, so it was... I think Daniel caused it. I think it was slightly careless on his part. I agree with there not being a penalty because there is an established situation on the first lap with a bit more leniency because there's a lot more going on. And if you were racing, even if this was a 3-car fight later in the Grand Prix, I suspect Ricciardo could have got a penalty. The steward said that the 2 key factors were the fact it was on the opening lap and the fact there was a 3rd car involved. I don't think the 3rd car being involved, that's Lance Stroll on the left-hand side, who was actually behind Ricciardo, and it was just his presence that was a problem. He wasn't actually involved in the incident itself. I don't think that would have actually been enough of a mitigating circumstance later in the Grand Prix, because I think later in the Grand Prix, when it's less settled, There's less adrenaline, it's less frenzied because it's not the opening lap and the first couple of corners. I think the expectation on Ricciardo having a slightly better grasp of his surroundings on both sides would be greater, and therefore you're judging the incident differently. Judging this one in isolation, it seems pretty clear to me. Ricciardo gets a bit of a snap on the exit of turn 2. He's aware of Stroll starting to show his nose on the left-hand side, so he's focused on that. You can see him looking in his mirror. Then he moves back across to the right, partly because he's making sure he leaves Stroll room, partly because I think he knows that he's clear of Stroll and can take the racing line into the next corner. And because he's been so preoccupied with Stroll in his left side mirror, he hasn't seen Albon approach on the right side. Albon is not trying to do some kind of Hail Mary, hang it around the outside, overtake at that point. He's going in a straight line. There's a gap. There's a significant momentum difference, so he's perfectly entitled to put his car there. And he actually realised before Ricciardo that there was an accident coming, and he braked and tried to get out of it, but by that point Ricciardo had moved over too quickly. They collide, fly into the barriers. Another massive crash for Williams, another load of damage, so much so that Albon said he was on his way into the tyres and he was thinking, this isn't going to be good for us, we don't need this now. So yeah, I'm not fussed about there not being a penalty, but yeah, I struggle to side with some of the interpretations I saw of the incident, indicating that Albon was in some way doing wrong by putting his car where he did.
Yeah, there's always an element of risk in any kind of positioning, but he was kind of where the way the first couple of corners played out put him ultimately, and I wouldn't have penalised Ricciardo absolutely. I'd describe it as a little bit careless, because I never like it when on the first laps of races people move across the track and then say, oh, I didn't see them, and it's like, well, you didn't check and it's the first lap of the race and there's a lot of cars around, so you kind of need to, but it's difficult, there's a lot going on. He was looking to, it happens, it was an honest mistake, so yeah, I certainly wouldn't like to see it being penalised, but yeah, just the last thing that Williams needed ultimately, just absolute agony for them, and chassis having to go back to be potentially patched up a bit again. It doesn't sound like it's anywhere near as bad as the Australia damage, but hopefully. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, it is hard to tell, especially because, as Albon pointed out, the car stopped quite suddenly because of the nature of the way it went into the barrier, and then so that's the kind of thing that all that energy would have gone into the chassis, and it's so easy then for the pickup point to puncture a hole or dent the tub or whatever. So that's why it has to go back to Grove. I mean, that's significant in itself because it's another hefty freight job. My suspicion is because those cars were meant to come straight here from Melbourne. One didn't, the one that Sargent ended up racing, because Albon crashed that one in Melbourne in practice. That one went back to the UK, got fixed, and then came back out. So I imagine it's the same situation now. Both cars should be going on to China from here, but now one of them is going to have to go back to Grove to be patched up. And as best as I can understand it, because I know roughly where they were at after the first two crashes, that's Albon's in Melbourne and Sargent's in practice here, they were already pushing $2 million worth of crash damage coming out the budget cap. That's repairs, part.
Can't skip the glitter. See glitter. That light blue.
Production, but obviously also freight costs and whatnot in terms of the sort of extra emergency measures you need to take to then get all of that sorted. So now you're going to be looking at probably easy $2.5 million, I'd imagine, that's coming out of Williams' cost cap. They all have a provision in the cost cap. They build in that bit of a damage buffer, but I would imagine Williams is a very, very, very long way into that allowance now, and they've done it 4 races into the season. So this is borderline worst case scenario, especially once you factor in where they've happened. In Australia, then back to the UK, back out to Japan, now back to the UK, and then back to China again. It's an absolute nightmare. And they still don't have a spare because of all of this.
Yeah, spare's coming in Miami now. Originally, I think it was going to be China, they thought, in Australia, but yeah, Miami now. And of course, Logan Sargent had a shunt at turn 7 mark on Friday, which kept him out of the rest of the running. I think that was on his first flying lap as well, which won't have helped. But he's frustrating, Sargent, isn't he? Because he had that mistake on the Friday, And then looked at qualifying. He was running the old spec front wing. He thought, well, all right, pace deficit, not bad recovery. And then the race actually was going quite nicely. And then, of course, it goes off at Degner. It sort of summed up Logan Sargent in a weekend of there's bits where you say, oh, actually, this could be going somewhere. And then it's, oh, right, there's two big needless errors.
Yeah, it's just that nearly always, it's never quite gets converted. Long way into his second season now. I don't think it's really happening for him, and it's not easy circumstances. We know that. You have to make some allowance for that, but it's very, very difficult to see him clawing his way sort of back into making a case for himself that he must be on the F1 grid next year.
Yeah, ultimately he's in the car. He's got the opportunity. He can still turn it round, and yeah, he'll just be hoping that he can do it. Shall we have a little bit of Sauber chat now? I think we should.
Welcome.
Oh my God. Time for Bottas. I mean, he looked kind of good in the race. Then, I don't know how much Kevin Magnussen ruined his race, but being behind him can't make the race more fun for him.
To Valtteri Bottas sympathy corner.
Right, Mark, Valtteri Bottas, he felt this was his and Sauber's strongest weekend. Once again, it was one in which a point was possible, given he was ahead of Yuki Tsunoda in that middle stint. So what went wrong, and how sympathetic are you to Valtteri this week?
Oh, totally sympathetic. This is a very valid entry into Valtteri Bottas sympathy corner. The car had a new floor, it was significantly improved. He had some decent pace, and yes, I think he could well have been in the points had things gone more smoothly. They still haven't got a full fix on for the wheel nuts, and although this time the pit stops didn't go disastrously wrong, they were still pretty pedestrian by the standards of the cutting edge in Formula One. So
I mean, you could say they didn't fail the pit stop equally much as they have done the races before.
4 seconds, that sort of time. And so coming in at the same time as everybody else, obviously he lost out. And because it's, I think maybe they should have just concentrated on doing their own, their own sequence and not worrying too much about undercutting or defending from undercutting, because if you're going to be taking second and a half, 2 seconds longer than everybody else to do a pit stop, you're going to either be undercut or not prevent yourself being undercut. So, another entry.
That was a pretty cool sight, though, wasn't it? When they all came into the pits, and it was a crunch moment. Yuki Tsunoda was absolutely delighted after that.
Yeah, you don't get many of those kind of old school pit stop battles anymore. The pit stops are a little bit too short to allow that, but obviously, yeah, with Sauber adding a few seconds to their pit stop time, it makes that possible. It was a shame because actually in that middle stint, Bottas had done quite well. He'd done a little bit better than Tsunoda in terms of, because there was some traffic in the form of those who'd yet to stop, and he'd given himself a little bit of a margin, and yeah, it was coming together well. And it's a shame because Australia Bottas drove really well, Suzuka as well, and yeah, there again he is pointless. So yeah, lots of sympathy. That's 4 visits to Valtteri Bottas sympathy corner for us this year.
Yeah, this year, and they will probably continue every race until the stake F1 team Kick Sauber will leave the sport and Audi will finally come in. But because until then they were still gambling the pit stop.
Yeah, in in the first 4 races, and I really appreciate Valtteri doing that jingle for us, and I like the fact he's given us an excuse to use it, but he's going a bit too far. Let's hope the next race for him goes a little bit better. Right,
I mean, it can't be worse than Alpine.
It's time for questions from the Race Members Club. As always, thanks for your support. If you'd like to find out more about the Race Members Club and the various benefits of joining, see the link in the description of this episode or check out our website. And remember, you can also sign up via Apple Podcasts. Mark, the first question I'll aim for you. It's a double question. The first from Ollie Emerson, who says, could Charles Leclerc have threatened for second place if he'd started higher up the grid? And
yes, he could. Sainz can't.
From Alexander Law, why was Leclerc able to maintain pace for a very long time on the medium
good
tyre?
Question.
Could he have threatened for second had he qualified better? Yes, I think he probably could.
Oh,
but he didn't qualify better.
Fish for the collection.
It was to do with he didn't do a very good first run in Q1, so I had to use another set another set of soft tyres, so he only
Don't
had the one
scare
set
me.
for Q3.
Fucking
And
mean
that's
fish.
not the first time that's happened recently. So it's, that's all part of the game. So, yes, had he done better, he would have done better. The other one was, what was the second part?
How he managed to go so long on the mediums when most
Oh
others
yeah,
couldn't.
yeah, I mean, he was able to go a long time on the mediums. He's very good at tyre conservation and combining that with pace. The Ferrari is now very good on the tyres. Plus, he wasn't under any undercut threat
For
from.
some reason, Mercedes was bad. Is that somewhat funny? Fuck. Zombie in the wall.
Behind, so there's no reason why you had to come in any earlier than the absolute last moment, and therefore give yourself a bigger tyre offset into the second stint. And so yeah, that made that one stint feasible, and he was able to make that soft tyre last far longer at a better pace than the Mercedes drivers were able to make the hard.
Scott, a question for you now on a related topic from.
And one more funny, even more funny. Hamilton is famous to complain about his tires, and then they always are good, and now they never was good.
Mark Malipard, who
Maybe
says Ferrari strategies were determined by Saturday's results, but who actually had the better race drive, Sainz or Leclerc?
Oh, it's really
Leclerc, 100%.
difficult.
No, not
Sainz did very,
difficult.
very well. Sainz had the better weekend. I was really impressed with Leclerc's drive. So I would probably rate Leclerc's Grand Prix better, because that
Drive of
first stint I
the
thought was
day.
fantastic. I then thought he was doing a really good job. Yes, okay, so he was helped by the timing of that McLaren pit stop with Lando Norris. I don't know about iReview, but I was absolutely stunned when Norris followed him into the pits. I know he'd got the call, but I assumed he'd be given a box opposite. You know, don't follow Leclerc in. But basically, I just thought Leclerc's driving, his time management, his speed when he needed it was absolutely brilliant. So I'd give Sainz the higher mark for the weekend and Leclerc a slightly higher mark for the Sunday.
He did have that moment with
Looked
Degman
like
too, though.
one
That's the only real criticism for.
Oh, he did. That's a
for
good
the
point.
collector.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it didn't cost him anything, did it, in the final result? So I might not let him off, but I might not mark him down too much for it.
Fair. Well, the next question I'll take from Jacobus VDL, who says, what has qualifying and race pace at the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix told us about the rates of development of the team since last year's race? Which teams have made the biggest steps and who the least? Well, if you look at the qualifying pace, which is the most accurate measure we've got, because everybody's going...
Mercedes are bad, Alpine is bad, and Visa Cash Up RB Formula 1 team and Williams is doing a good job.
Flat out on low
Maybe.
fuel. Aston Martin actually took the biggest step in terms of the performance improvement with a 1.874 second.
Yeah, Aston Martin. With Alonso, they are improving. With Stroll, they are not improving.
Game. Then Sauber, Haas and Mercedes. Actually, the smallest was Red
Hashtag
Bull, which I think
Stroll
partly
should lead.
reflected the fact that Verstappen was struggling a little bit to get the absolute most out of everything in the tyres
And then Yuki Tsunoda can
in
Aston
qualifying.
Martin.
So, as always, when it's just sort of one comparative data point, it doesn't tell you everything, but it was a useful little benchmark, because the last Japanese Grand Prix was only 6 months ago, and it's also the first time we've had a comparison on absolutely identical tyres, because there was that small tyre construction change at Silverstone in the middle part of last year.
No,
But yeah,
can try
certainly
this.
interesting to see Aston Martin, who were of course
Like
struggling a lot
ground,
at this stage last season,
Drown,
taking
is
the
it?
biggest step, but still not being in an overall great position, and requiring the miracle of
that's it.
Fernando Alonso
Okay.
to
That's
get
the
6
following.
places, he explained. Mark, a question for you from Simon Townend, who says, I was quite surprised by how willing Lewis was to let George by.
Good damn it.
Were there other
Now it
factors at
disappeared.
play, or has he just lost the bottle for a fight? And similarly, Simon Toms asks why Lewis volunteered
next
to let
zombie.
George through, and
let
is that
Brown.
a signal his motivation is low?
No, I don't think it's either of those things. I think Lewis was still very, very seriously trying to stay on course for the one stop. He could feel the tyres were degrading pretty quickly, the fronts especially, and he just reasoned that there's no way I can stay on this
now that's
strategy
have it.
if I'm having to do the pace that George is forcing upon me, so I might as well let him by. Maybe George at that point had realised one stop's never going to work. I just need to get past because there's going to be a two-stop anyway.
So weird.
We don't know what George was thinking, but that was Lewis's thoughts as to why he surrendered the place. He didn't feel it was feasible to run at any harder and still stay on a one stop, which he was told was the plan. You know, that was why they'd put the hards on at the restart.
And it's funny because and it's a good example of just how you can see this exactly the same incident in completely contrasting ways, because the flip side of how you can view what Lewis did is that there's absolutely no question of his what's the word, not loyalty as such, but you know, his willingness to play the team game, even though he's in his final year at Mercedes, even though things aren't going particularly well.
Problem.
He wasn't particularly fussed about sacrificing himself in that specific moment. Obviously, he had his own interests at play, as Mark was explaining. But he didn't need to volunteer it. He didn't need. I'm sure he would have ceded to the order if it had come from at Mercedes' behest rather than his own. I'm not pushing that position particularly. I just know that there are people who viewed it that way. So it's just interesting. You can that some people could interpret it as Lewis isn't up for it, and others could just say, "Well, look at."
Hey, are we already talking about Mercedes? Fuck me, I missed so much. Yeah, Mercedes, Hamilton, wash.
That he's still being a team player. It's just an interesting way that this kind of thing can just be flipped depending on the perspective.
Next question for you, Scott, from Kevin Hageman.
Fuck me, I want to hear the full question about Mercedes.
From at Mercedes' behest rather than his own. But to play the is that there's absolutely no question of his...
Maybe George at that point had realised... I don't think it's either of them.
He explained. Mark, a question for you from Simon Townend, who says, I was quite surprised by how willing Lewis was to let George by.
I mean, he knows his place. He is the second driver in Mercedes. That's why he's leaving to Ferrari to maybe be second driver again. Or, I mean, like he said, he didn't have any grip on the tires, and he felt like Josh Russell could actually drive the car. So why not let him by? Peter Winsor think is ridiculous, weird that Hamilton will get that conclusion that Josh Russell making a better job than him, but hey, once a year Hamilton can accept his bad, right?
Were there other factors at play, or has he just lost the bottle for a fight? And similarly, Simon Toms asks why Lewis volunteered to let George through, and is that a signal his motivation is low?
No, I don't think it's either of those things. I think
it could be.
Lewis was still very, very seriously trying to...
Yeah, after he let Russell pass, Danny was really seriously to get back.
Stay on course for the one stop. He could feel the tyres were degrading pretty quickly, the fronts especially, and he just reasoned that there's no way I can stay on this strategy if I'm having to do the pace that George is forcing upon me, so I might as well let him by. Maybe George at that point had realised one stop's never going to work, I just need to get past because there's going to be a two-stop anyway. We don't know what George was thinking, but that was Lewis's thoughts.
Wait, so Russell learned something that Hamilton didn't? What?
As to why he
surrendered second driver can't see what the first driver can do.
To run at any harder and still stay on a one stop, which he was told was the plan. You know, that was why they'd put the hards on at the restart.
And it's funny because and it's a good example of just how you can see this exactly the same incident in completely contrasting ways, because the flip side of how you can view what Lewis did is that there's absolutely no question of his what's the word, not loyalty as such, but you know,
yeah, the loyalty, words. That's why he leaves for Ferrari. He really thinks good on Mercedes.
His willingness to play the team game, even though he's in his final year at Mercedes, even though things aren't going particularly well. He wasn't particularly fussed about sacrificing himself in that specific moment. Obviously, he had his own interests at play, as Mark was explaining, but he didn't need to volunteer it. He didn't need. I'm sure he would have ceded to the order if it had come from at Mercedes' behest rather than his own. I'm not pushing that position particularly. I just know that there are people who viewed it that way. So it's just interesting. That some people could interpret it as Lewis isn't up for it, and others could just say, well, look at that, he's still being a team player. It's just an interesting way.
Team being a team player. Yeah, the biggest team player ever. Like with Nico Rosberg, the biggest team player.
This kind of thing can just be flipped depending on the perspective.
Next question for you, Scott, from Kevin Hagerman, who says, was Fernando Alonso's pace advantage over Mercedes genuine, or was it just caused by the failed one-stop attempt? I'm also wondering if the now even bigger performance gap between Alonso and Stroll is caused by Stroll not being able to improve with the car, just like Perez did the last 2 seasons with...
Yeah, Stroll, I mean, if he's still bad 2025, he should make room for Tsunoda. So Tsunoda and Honda can join Aston Martin the same year. Wouldn't that be real beautiful, seeing Japanese engine with a Japanese driver getting podiums, and who knows, maybe in the future wins
with Red Bull.
Med pågens färska hönekaka är sommaren bara en tugga
5
bort.
second and until skip.
Oh well, surely the pace advantage was just Alonso's outright brilliance in this Grand Prix, as we've joked about a couple of times. No, Fernando was excellent in this race.
It would be far less funny if he wasn't brilliant. It's that amazing fact with him, as I think I've mentioned before, that he's so brilliant, but he needs to tell everyone. There's something fascinating psychologically about that. But anyway,
I mean, the team say Lance and Alonso do the same times. Doesn't that mean you can easily say, oh, because I did such a good work? Oh, new fish for the collection. I mean, you're out driving this bad car in a so good way.
Answer the actual question rather than listening to my nonsense.
I'll always listen to your nonsense, Ed. No, I think it was...
Well, you have to.
Yeah, that's true. Only for another 10 minutes or so at least. I think with this situation, it depended. There were parts of the Grand Prix where the Aston was quick and was quicker than it has been in previous races, where it has struggled actually on some.
Is that because of Lance Stroll or because of Alonso? What time do you go on? The Alonso time or the Lance Stroll time?
Sunday relative to Saturday. I think once Mercedes got onto a more conventional strategy, we saw that the Mercedes was the faster car. So I think Alonso was just making hay while the sun shone in the majority of the race, and then did an excellent job holding on at the end. The fact that he was able to keep Oscar Piastri at arm's length throughout, he said, you can never be 100% sure that you'll be confident that you'll be clear right until the end, because you don't know how the tyres are going to drop off, or if Russell's going to be able to maintain that charging pace until the end of the Grand Prix. But they were, he just did a good job. He was excellent when the car was quicker, or the strategy was quicker, and then he'd done the hard work by the time the Mercedes was the faster car or on the faster strategy. As for Stroll, I think there is something in that. I think it's quite clear that Stroll is a bit more vulnerable or sensitive to the car changing. When the car's in a good window for him, like it was in Melbourne, he's not actually that far off Alonso. He was on a good level versus Alonso in Melbourne, and he's done that a few times, plenty of times in their time together as teammates. His problem is that he can go missing during a weekend, and
he can go missing for half a year and nothing changed.
He can be thrown off his game quite easily. So I think for this one, it was a little bit of the latter. He never seemed particularly happy or impressed with the upgrade. They had a not stunning update here, but it was part of the constant attempt to evolve the car and make it quicker. Alonso didn't seem unhappy with it, but Stroll said he had nothing positive to say about it after qualifying, which I thought was a bit pessimistic.
Green and orange.
Yeah, there was a bit of talk from the team about, Lance being a bit unfortunate. He lost some running in FP1, having rakes added and removed from the car because he was doing the upgrade check-in on Friday, and that put him on a bit of the back foot. But you could argue that actually, the flip side is Alonso didn't have that car on Friday and then had to get used to it on Saturday.
Absolutely. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, Lance Stroll, Suzuka's not really a circuit. He doesn't have a great record there by his standards, so I think that maybe played a part as well. The next question from Villa Nikari, who says, should Logan Sargent reversing onto the track be punished? It looks super dangerous and sketchy. I'll take that one. Ultimately, the cars do have a reverse gear for a reason. It's mandatory, and it was okay that he rejoined because it stopped the need for a safety car potentially and that kind of thing. It wasn't ideal because there were Piastri and Alonso coming. The only communication I had, I did check the onboard, was he was told sort of as he was reversing that Piastri and Alonso were coming and to watch out. He didn't seem to watch out hugely, although he did slightly pause before kind of dropping the clutch and heading off. So I think it was all right, a little bit dicey, but there are yellow flags. There would have been double yellow wave flags out there. They're there for a reason. It's probably easier to have a driver rejoining than just leaving it parked.
And the main thing to point out as well, or the other thing to point out rather, is that it is allowed. The only part you can't reverse is the pit lane, right? So we've seen it before. Remember Lewis Hamilton at Imola in 2021 when Mercedes was kind of guiding him back onto the track. So we've seen it before. You're right, it is a little bit sketchy sometimes, but it's within the rules. So yeah, there's no regulatory reason why he couldn't do it or should have been punished.
Next question, Mark, from Ben Hawkes. Could Norris have finished third, or did Ferrari have better performance and tyre deck?
They are better.
The latter. It was quite clear. And Lando had track position over them because he'd done
he could maybe finish fourth.
A better qualifying lap, but that was all. The Ferrari was clearly a much faster car with better tyre deck. And it was just, Sainz would have had to have done something wrong not to have beaten the McLaren.
Next up for you, Scott from Flavio Diomede. Now, this one is partly a statement, but worth a comment. Another week, another example of Mercedes seemingly lost at strategy.
It's a blunt observation. I would say I'm caught in two minds on it. In Mercedes' defence, I can see why when you're at the back of that group, at the front, and it's so closely matched, and you're not 100% convinced of what kind of progress will be possible, then being offset with the after the red flag and giving yourself that flexibility, as they described it, to switch to either commit to the one stop or switch to the two stop. I can see the logic there, because if the one stop pays off, you're offset and you might actually be able to gain something that you wouldn't get through track position. So and that's not an illegitimate argument. I think there is some merit to that. But on the other hand, which I guess is what Flavio is kind of alluding to, it's more just you end up a little bit in no man's land and it doesn't work out because you lose so much time being overtaken and you don't really get a proper pit win.
Yeah, that was so funny. The hard tire is meant to keep being in the road for longer, but then getting past, people go in at the pits and then they starting to getting closer to the and then pass you, and you still have not done the tire change. Then it's really bad, because when you finally go into the pit, they can also just go into the
window
pit
to then react, so you just end up being a little bit lost.
Yeah, and I mean it's very easy to just do the standard same thing as everybody else and therefore not be at risk of getting it wrong.
Oh my god.
But when you start in 7th and 9th, why the hell do that? When the option is there's a realistic option there that if you did something different, it might be rewarded. That is a far more logical choice from 7th and 9th than saying let's do the standard thing and not risk getting it wrong.
Yeah, and especially
for Mercedes, it's not a logical. It's retarded. If you're on Visa Cash App RB Formula 1 team or Stake F1 team Kick Sauber, then you should go on the wheel, because that will maybe make so you actually get points. For Mercedes to do it, that's just bad. So yeah, let's go down with the last fishes. Where did I have some fishes? Did I have them? Oh, fuck me. Lantern. And then we go down and
With
things
a lack
just
of
clip
data
up, hopefully.
in terms of the performance of the tyre and the conditions, etc. Yeah, it's definitely worth a go. A question I'll take now from Stuart Coulter, who says Alpine appeared to have made some progress after their dismal start in Bahrain, but today they seem to have regressed significantly. Did Suzuka exaggerate the weaknesses of their car, or were there any extenuating circumstances? Well, the car's just a bit slow. Actually, on qualifying pace, they were a little bit closer than Australia and Saudi Arabia based on percentage deficit, but the race was pretty poor. Okay, Gasly had some damage from, as he put it over the radio, Esteban hit me, but it was really Gasly hitting Ocon as he was trying to squeeze through a gap. So that held Gasly up. Ocon did what he could, but yeah, very much they were very much at the back, only ahead of Sargent because Sargent had that off. So it's just not a very good car, and they had a new nose and a few other bits and pieces, but it's not going to transform it just like that. And a track like Suzuka will expose a not very good car aerodynamically. So yeah, it just confirms there's not going to be a quick fix for Alpine. I think kind of around testing, they thought that maybe they might have enough here to start making a real difference and be a genuine Q2 car. But although Ocon was in Q2 this weekend, I don't think the Alpine can be said to be a genuine Q2 car. It's largely circumstantial. And Mark, I'll fire the last question at you from Jack Aitken, the Australian Jack Aitken, not the former Williams driver, who says Oscar Piastri really struggled with tyre wear during the 2023 Japanese Grand Prix. Did any of those issues linger today, and what learnings was he able to apply?
Yellow or...
No, I don't think he was struggling so much with controlling the tyre deg this time. His tyre deg wasn't any worse than Lando Norris's. He was just a little bit off Lando's pace, and I think that all goes back to qualifying. The way that the car was behaving around here and the way you had to set it up to look after the tyres in the race. He just didn't get as much out of it as Lando did. It's quite a specific it's quite a specific challenge around this place in particular, where it's not just about how hard you can push through the S's and all the traditional things that make this a great track, but it's also about combining that with not having the tyre overworked even over one lap in qualifying. And it was the qualifying deficit really which defined his weekend, rather than any deficit in the race.
And I think it is interesting because Piastri's still in his second season only. He's early in his second season, and I think it shows how well Norris tends to put everything together. That there will be weekends like this. Obviously, he ended up 8th with Norris 5th, where he looks like he struggles a little bit more and doesn't quite get as much out of the car. But that's going to happen because he's still building up that data bank, as you always put it, Mark. So yeah, it wasn't a great weekend, as he said after the race, and disappointing. He had that small error that let Russell pass right at the end, but still could have been a lot worse, and he'll still keep on improving. Well, thanks very much to Mark and Scott for your insight, and thanks to everybody who sent in questions. We'll try and tackle some more of those in our midweek podcast, because once again, we've had an absolute deluge of them, and we really appreciate that. Head to our website, plenty to read there. Listen to our other podcasts, including Bring Back V10s, which tells classic F1 stories, and the Race F1 Tech Show with Gary Anderson. Have a look at our YouTube channel as well. Well, there's a 2-week gap now until China, so stay with us for everything you need to know from the world of Formula One.
Yeah, can take that away. And that was all the race stuff, man. Now we just finish up, let's say, both spotty green, orange, green, orange, green, orange. Light blue, black, light blue, black, light blue, black, and it's a lot of light blue, but in the wrong order. It's a sunstreak, cyan green, cyan green. They have a green at least. Sign green. And this was... What? Oh, I didn't do that, I think. Lime gray. Lime gray. Blockfish, lime, light blue, lime, light blue. Can you have lime, light blue, lime, light blue? Nope. So we have lime blue and light, lime light blue. Okay, and then we just go away with that. Then we put that. And then we place that, and then it's time to get some more. Oh, we can take up some lava before we go up. Then we'll get some more iron for buckets. What the fuck? Oh, I ran 100% off on the wrong way. This was the right way to get to where I first wanted to go, but to the wrong way to get the lava. Now we will run to the right place where I want to. Oh, so that's why I actually go up one stair, because the elevator is up one stair. Okay, that explains everything in that. There I can put the fish. Do I put the fish here? There I put the fish. Yeah. So now it is, let's see, 21, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, 12 days left, and then it's Formula 1 in China. And when that's happened, Mercedes will probably still be bad, but the people will still say, hey, they're improving. Because, I mean, look how close it is in qualifying. Yeah, true. But until the next race will happen, people will still say Mercedes